This is a special, separate prayer service, though. It's something that Ronald Reagan did in 1981 and 85. And actually, Franklin Roosevelt started having a prayer service as part of Inauguration Day back in 1933. Mr. Roosevelt, President Truman, and Ronald Reagan have all prayed at this church. And I'm told that the Bushes have come here frequently over the last 8 years.
Ed Bradley is our main man for the parade this afternoon, and to help us this morning as well, Ed, right across from the White House and may have the best seat of the day. What you see behind Ed is the viewing platform where President-elect, he'll be president by the time he gets there, and Mrs. Bush will be having their joyous afternoon. Ed, good morning to you. It's quite a difference from 8 years ago.
It is, Dan. Good morning. I think about the only similarity is the weather you talked about. A fairly mild day as Washington January days go. But you remember 8 years ago you had a very unpopular president, Jimmy Carter, leaving office. Today, the most popular president since we've been taking polls leaving office. But the big difference is that 8 years ago you had those 52 hostages who'd been held in Iran for 444 days, leaving captivity just as President Reagan was taking his oath of office. That, of course, is not there today, but we should remember that more Americans have been kidnapped since then, and today 9 Americans are still being held hostage. A smaller shadow, but still a shadow.
Ed, you mentioned, and I know you meant this kindly, that Jimmy Carter left office as a very unpopular president. I wonder, is that really fair? We don't want to dwell on this. This is George Bush's day, and it's a great day for the Republican Party. But certainly in the days and years since President Carter has left office, he's looked somewhat better than he did the day he left. He walked out of the White House. Or would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I see similarities between President Carter and President Truman. You know, there were a lot of people who vilified Truman when he was in office. But as the years passed, his stature grew, and I think the same thing will happen with Jimmy Carter. I think his presidency was overshadowed by what happened in Iran, and people who saw him, I mean, really, when you listen to George Bush talk about a kinder and gentler nation, that was what Jimmy Carter had in mind. He very, very much was a kind, gentle man, but people saw that as weakness because, I think, of what was happening in Iran. But I think as time passes, people look more fondly at Jimmy Carter. But at the time he left office, he was a very unpopular president.
What we're doing now is waiting for President-elect and Mrs. Bush to emerge from Blair House and go over to St. John's Church, just, the length of a football field away from Blair House. This is a camera position high up and looking at the front entrance of Blair House. Now, if you're wondering, no, presidents-elect have not always spent the night before their swearing in at Blair House. Some have, and some have not. For example, President Reagan did spend the time in Blair House before he was sworn in. And now, the president-elect and Mrs. Bush.
All right, he's here. Get him.
Emerge. We pause for a second. Good morning, Mr. President-elect. And Mrs. Bush, as she has smilingly told us she would do, dressed in blue. That'll be her color, as red was for Nancy Reagan. Now, Charles, they're stepping into this new $600,000 black Lincoln Town Car limo, hand-built by the Ford Motor Company. Ronald Reagan moved around in a Cadillac, special presidential limousine. This is a new, longer and somewhat lower-slung model. We're told it has bullet-resistant tires. It's 22 feet long. Now, that's half the length of your average Greyhound bus. President-elect Mrs. Bush will be riding it around the block to the church.
Well, it's nice to think of our president as being safe, and I suppose that's as safe a car as anyone could have.
Excuse me, Charles, one moment. I noticed that while we were told this would be the Lincoln, that's a Cadillac insignia on the back, so I believe, in fact, hate to interrupt you, that having introduced this Lincoln Town Car limo, which we're supposed to see later in the day, that right now that he's riding in, I guess, his vice presidential limousine, shall we call it the old Cadillac?
He doesn't get the $600,000 model until he earns it at noon, I guess.
So this will be a short motorcade from Blair House, literally right around the block. Lafayette Park, which is directly in front of the White House, and a great American institution in its own right, a place where a number of homeless people practically call home, but they have been moved out for this occasion. We'll be hearing something more about that as the day goes along. Right now, as the Bush motorcade nears St. John's Church, we'll mention to you that inside the church, they'll be singing God of Our Fathers, Amazing Grace, Onward Christian Soldiers. And participants in the service will include the Reverend John C. Harper, who will lead the services. He is the rector of St. John's. And if you hear a bell, and I hope we will have an opportunity to hear that bell as perhaps at the end of these services, the bell at St. John's is cast from a cannon captured from the British in the War of 1812. Sometimes, Charles, you forget that the British were in Washington in 1812, even burned the White House. Really only the east room of the White House survived unscathed from that War of 1812. But after the United States prevailed, they cast part of one of those cannons captured the British into the bell for this church, so I hope we'll hear it as the morning goes along. Charlie, have you ever been inside this St. John's Church?
Yes, I have, and it's a very beautiful church of the colonial style.
Isn't it?
And an experience to remember. I think all our presidents since Madison have visited the church, and a number of them have belonged to it.
And pew number 54 is the traditional seat of worship for the First Family. Jacqueline Adams just outside the church.
Yes, the Bushes are just emerging from their limousine. Faith and family is one of the enduring themes, has been one of the enduring themes of the campaign, and we're told it's going to be one of the themes of this new administration. And we've seen a lot of family at Blair House, and this is the faith part. Mrs. Bush and the President-elect are now shaking hands with Reverend Harper and slowly walking into the building.
Jackie, as you mentioned earlier, the Quayles came earlier and will be at this same church service, will they not?
That's right. And I believe the Quayles pastor is going to be participating in the service, as is Mrs. James Baker.
And speaking of the homeless, Mrs. James Baker has been very active, Charles, in Washington, not just recently, but over the years, in trying to do things for the homeless. Well, the Bushes are in church, and the services are beginning there. Now, here's what will be coming up this morning and during the day on our CBS News live coverage from Washington of this great Inauguration Day. The Bushes will return to Blair House after the church services. About 9:30, we'll be on the air for that. And at 10:30 Eastern Time, President and Nancy Reagan will greet the Bushes at the White House. About 10:55, the motorcade will start to Capitol Hill at 11:20. Fanfares for the inauguration. We hope to give you, right through the speaker in your home there on your television set, a lot of the music. There'll be some terrifically good music coming from the United States Marine Band to sort of get us in the mood for the inauguration later in the day. So that's what we can look forward to. At 11:50, the swearing in of our new Vice President, Dan Quayle. Then at 11:59, has to be done by noon, swearing in of George Bush. 12:45, President Reagan and Mrs. Reagan will be departing Washington for California. Then at 2 o'clock, we'll start our coverage of the inaugural parade. That's the schedule for today. Dan Rather with Charles Kuralt and our CBS News team. Stick with us here during the day. We'll be back on the air in about a half hour as the Bushes leave church.
This special report is part of CBS News' continuing coverage of the inauguration of George Bush. This is CBS.